Right now, as you read this, something is happening inside your Gmail account that you never agreed to. Not a hacker, not a virus, not some shadowy third-party breach. This is something far more calculated, far more deliberate, and far more difficult to stop. Because the entity doing it is the same company that built your inbox, owns your search history, maps your daily routes, and has quietly become one of the most powerful intelligence-gathering organizations on the planet. And they just flipped a switch, silently, without asking you. The question is not whether it happened. The question is, why did nobody warn you? There are approximately 1.8 billion people on this planet who use Gmail. That number alone should give you pause, not because it is impressive, which it is, but because of what it represents. 1.8 billion inboxes, 1.8 billion private conversations, 1.8 billion collections of medical appointments, bank statements, personal confessions, business strategies, legal documents, and intimate exchanges between human beings who believed with complete confidence that their words were their own. And on a single day in October 2025, all of that changed. On October 10th, 2025, Google allegedly flipped a switch. Not metaphorically, not gradually. On a specific date, at a specific moment, a setting inside your Gmail account was silently changed. And if you are among the majority of Gmail users around the world, you were never told. You received no notification. You saw no banner. You were not asked to agree. According to a class action lawsuit, Google previously offered Gemini's smart features as an opt-in tool, but on or around October 10th, 2025, allegedly switched the setting on by default for Gmail, chat, and Meet accounts. Think about what that means. A feature that once required your deliberate, conscious choice to activate, a feature that was designed to require your consent, was suddenly running inside your account without it. But here is where it gets worse. Most people still do not know this happened. And the ones who do know are discovering that turning it off is not as simple as clicking a single button. You have to manually turn off smart features in the settings menu in two separate locations buried inside a settings architecture that the average user has never navigated and was never designed to be easy to navigate. That is not an accident. Read that again. It requires two manual steps in two hidden menus to undo something that was activated without your knowledge in the first place. This is not a glitch. This is not an oversight. This is engineering with intention. The feature at the center of this storm is called Smart Features. And if that name sounds harmless to you, even helpful, that is precisely the point. As Malwarebytes explains, the reason behind this is Google's push to power new Gmail features with its Gemini AI, helping you write emails faster and manage your inbox more efficiently. To do that, Google is using real email content, including attachments, to train and refine its AI models. Let that land for a moment. The emails you wrote to your doctor, the salary negotiation you conducted with your employer, the private conversation you had with a family member during a crisis, the legal advice your attorney sent you in confidence, all of it, potentially being processed by an artificial intelligence system that you never invited into your inbox. And this is where everything changes, because what Google did is not illegal in the traditional sense. It is not a crime to build an AI. It is not a crime to offer smart features. The controversy, the outrage, the lawsuits, they are all centered on one specific and deeply uncomfortable question. At what point does convenience become exploitation? At what point does the fine print of a terms of service agreement stop being consent and start being camouflage? Privacy experts have been asking this question for years, but now, for the first time, ordinary people are being forced to confront it inside their own inboxes. The firestorm started when a social media post viewed over 6.5 million times exposed the truth. You have been automatically opted in to allow Gmail to access all your private messages and attachments to train AI models. 6.5 million people saw that post. 6.5 million people who likely had no idea this setting existed, no idea it had been changed, and no idea what to do about it. The post spread because it touched something primal, the feeling of having your private space violated without your knowledge. And that feeling is not irrational. It is a rational response to a rational threat. Here is what most people are not seeing. And the anger, as justified as it is only the surface layer of a far deeper problem. Google's response to the backlash was swift and predictable. Google's response was swift but controversial. The company called reports misleading and insisted no policies had changed. "We do not use your Gmail content to train our Gemini AI model," spokesperson Jenny Thompson declared. On the surface, that denial sounds reassuring, but pay close attention to the precise language being used. They said they do not use your Gmail content to train the Gemini model. What they did not say, what they carefully avoided saying, is that your Gmail content is not being accessed, analyzed, processed, or used in any capacity whatsoever. That distinction is not semantic. That distinction is everything. The lawsuit distinguishes between using data for AI training versus using AI to analyze data. Even if Google is not training Gemini on your emails, the complaint argues that having AI scan and analyze your private communications without consent still violates California's Invasion of Privacy Act. In other words, whether or not your specific email is used to build a smarter AI model is almost beside the point. The real issue is that an artificial intelligence system now has access to the contents of your private inbox, and you were never explicitly asked to allow that. The legal case being built around this distinction could reshape how AI companies operate for decades. According to informed sources tracking the case, the lawsuit, Thelavir's Google, LLC, is one of the first major tests of whether decades-old wiretapping laws apply to a frontier AI system integrated into everyday email and messaging. This is not just a lawsuit about Gmail. This is a landmark moment in the legal history of artificial intelligence. Courts are being asked to decide whether the privacy protections that exist for human readers also apply to machine readers, whether an AI scanning your private correspondence constitutes a form of surveillance, whether the fact that a company built the platform you use to communicate gives them the implicit right to analyze what you say on it. And as of now, no court has delivered a definitive answer. Let us talk about what Gemini actually has access to, because the public conversation has been vague and the corporate statements have been strategic. According to the complaint, Gemini can access and analyze far more than just email text. The lawsuit alleges the AI can review entire histories of private communications, including every email and attachment sent and received in Gmail accounts, not just the emails you sent last week, not just the subject lines, every email, every attachment, the photograph your doctor sent you, the contract your company asked you to sign, the personal message you sent at 2 a.m. that you would never want read aloud in a courtroom, all of it accessible to a system that learns, adapts, and draws inferences. A system that is not bound by the human limitations of memory, discretion, or embarrassment. And this is where the situation becomes genuinely alarming. Because AI systems do not simply read and forget. They pattern match. They categorize. They draw inferences across thousands of data points that no human reader could connect at once. What does it mean when an AI has processed the full email history of 1.8 billion people? What kind of map does that create? Of human behavior, human vulnerability, human predictability? What kind of advantage does that create for the entity holding that map? These are not paranoid questions. These are the questions that intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and data scientists are actively grappling with. And they are questions that Google, to date, has not answered publicly. What most people are not seeing is the ecosystem problem. Even if you turn off smart features in your own Gmail account, even if you follow every step and every guide and successfully opt out of everything, you are still only half protected. Some users also point out a bigger issue. Even if you opt out, the person you're emailing might not. That means parts of your conversation could still be scanned. You cannot control the privacy settings of everyone you communicate with. If your email arrives in an inbox where smart features are still active, which statistically is most inboxes in the United States, then the content of your communication is still being processed. Privacy, in the age of AI-integrated email, is no longer a personal choice. It is a collective vulnerability. Privacy experts have explicitly urged Gmail users to switch off 2 key smart features settings, and they single out the cross-product data sharing as especially risky because it lets information from your inbox influence tools far beyond email. Think about what that means in practice. Information from your Gmail does not just stay in Gmail. Under the current default settings, it can flow into Google Drive, into Google Meet, into other Google Workspace products, into the broader ecosystem of services that Google operates across your digital life. Your inbox is not an isolated space. It is a node in a network. And that network now has an AI sitting at the center of it, processing everything that passes through. Let us talk about the regulatory landscape, because this is where the story gets geopolitically interesting. Google says that by default, smart feature settings are off if you live in the European Economic Area, Japan, Switzerland, or the United Kingdom. Stop and absorb that. If you live in Europe or Japan, these features are off by default. You're protected by law. But if you live in the United States, the country that built Silicon Valley, the country that houses Google's headquarters, you are opted in by default. The country with arguably the weakest federal privacy protections among developed democracies is the country where Google feels most comfortable flipping this switch without asking. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategic calculation about where the legal risk is lowest. The European Union's GDPR framework, Japan's Act on the Protection of Personal Information, Switzerland's revised Federal Act on Data Protection. These are not just bureaucratic regulations. They are legal walls that corporations cannot climb over without consequence. In the United States, no equivalent federal wall exists. The patchwork of state-level privacy laws, California's being the strongest, which is precisely why the lawsuit was filed there, creates a landscape that well-resourced corporations have learned to navigate with surgical precision. Google knows exactly where the fences are, and it operates right up to the edge of each one. The Federal Trade Commission has eyed similar practices, and with the lawsuit progressing, experts predict potential mandates for clearer consent mechanisms. This could force Google and peers to redesign user interfaces, prioritizing transparency over seamless data harvesting. But here's the critical word in that sentence: could. None of that has happened yet. Right now, today, as you are reading this, the default settings in most Gmail accounts in the United States still have smart features active. Right now, today, the AI is still running, and most of the 1.8 billion users around the world have not changed a single setting. And the corporate architecture behind all of this is worth examining carefully. Google is not a simple email company. Google is a data company that offers email as a service. The business model has always been built on the premise that user data is the product, or at minimum the fuel. What has changed is the sophistication of what that fuel can now power. For years, Google scanned Gmail for keywords to serve targeted advertising. That was controversial enough to generate years of criticism and legal challenges. But targeted advertising is, relatively speaking, a simple application. What Gemini can do with the same raw material is categorically different. While Google maintains that Gmail content is not used to train its public Gemini AI models, it can still scan and process emails, attachments, and other data for personalization features, like summarizing and drafting replies. The distinction between training and processing may seem technical, but the practical implication is the same. A machine is reading your mail. Now, let us talk about the lawsuit in precise terms, because the legal mechanics of this case are extraordinary. On July 7th, 2026, U.S. District Judge Noah Wise of the Northern District of California dismissed Thele v. Google, LLC, the proposed class action alleging Google secretly switched Gemini AI to default on for Gmail, Chat, and Meet users in October 2025 without consent. The judge found the plaintiffs hadn't described a concrete enough injury to establish standing. The case sits alongside a wave of similar AI and privacy disputes, including the Perplexity AI chat tracking class action, the consolidated Otter.ai note-taker wiretap class action, and the Apple Siri voice assistant privacy settlement. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern across the artificial intelligence industry. Companies are integrating their systems into private communications, emails, voice calls, meeting transcripts, chat logs, and doing so in ways that were not transparently disclosed to users. The Gmail situation is the largest and most visible flashpoint of a broader transformation in how private communication is being treated by the corporations that carry it. According to informed sources tracking the broader AI surveillance landscape, what is happening in Gmail is a preview of what every major communication platform will attempt in the next 2 to 3 years. The race to build smarter AI systems requires training data, and the richest, most behaviorally complex training data that exists is private human. Communication, email, messages, meetings. The companies that control those platforms have access to data that no other entity on the planet possesses, and the regulatory frameworks that might constrain how they use it are still being built, still being debated, and still years away from full implementation. What most people are not seeing is the compounding risk. The smart features controversy is not simply about whether Google is reading your emails today. It is about what happens as AI systems become more capable. Today, Gemini can summarize your emails and draft replies. Tomorrow, and here we are talking about a timeline of months, not years, AI systems integrated into your inbox will be able to predict your behavior, flag your political leanings, identify your financial stress levels, map your social network, and infer your psychological state from the pattern of your communications. None of that requires accessing classified data. All of it can be derived from an ordinary inbox. And if those capabilities exist, and they will, the question of who controls the AI controlling your inbox becomes one of the most consequential questions of the digital age. Attackers are not just sending crude spam from random servers. They are increasingly abusing Google's own infrastructure to make their scams look authentic. When a phishing email routes through or leverages legitimate Google tools, it can inherit some of the trust users place in the brand. This is the parallel threat that most coverage is missing entirely. At the very same moment that Google's AI integration is raising questions about internal data access, external bad actors are exploiting the same trusted infrastructure to conduct attacks of unprecedented sophistication. The credibility of the Gmail brand, its green check marks, its sender verification systems, its familiar interface, has become a weapon in the hands of people who want to deceive you. The more Gmail is trusted, the more valuable it becomes as a delivery vehicle for fraud. And the intersection of these two threats, by internal AI, data processing, and external AI-powered phishing, creates a security environment that is genuinely novel. Users are now navigating an inbox where the platform itself is analyzing their communications for corporate purposes, while criminals are simultaneously using that same platform's credibility to run scams. The inbox, once a relatively simple communication tool, has become a contested space, a space where multiple parties with different interests are simultaneously operating, each with a level of technical sophistication that far exceeds what the average user can see or defend against. Now, let us address the practical reality, because understanding the problem without knowing what to do about it is its own kind of helplessness. For desktop users, this involves opening the See All Settings tab, selecting Turn on Smart Features in Gmail, Chat, and Meet under Smart Features, and then disabling Manage Workspace Smart Feature Settings before saving changes. Mobile users must navigate to Settings, select their account, tap Data Privacy, toggle off Smart Features and Personalization, and adjust Google Workspace Smart Feature Settings. 2 separate menus, 2 separate toggles, on both desktop and mobile. And even after completing all of those steps, you are still only opting yourself out, not the people you communicate with, whose inboxes may still be processing the emails you send them. For stronger protection, consider additional steps. Block tracking pixels that reveal when you open emails and what device you use. Even if you disable Gemini, marketers and third parties can still track your email behavior through invisible spy pixels embedded in messages. This is the layer that almost nobody talks about. Tracking pixels, invisible, 1-pixel images embedded in marketing emails and even ordinary correspondence, silently communicate back to servers every time you open a message. They can reveal your IP address, your device type, your geographic location, the time of day you check your email, and your reading habits. Disabling smart features does not disable tracking pixels. Those require a separate set of tools and habits entirely. The real story here, the one that mainstream coverage keeps missing, is that the Gmail controversy is not fundamentally a story about one company making one controversial decision. It is a story about a structural transformation in the relationship between individuals and the platforms they depend on. For decades, the implicit contract of free digital services was understood, if imperfectly, to involve some exchange of personal data for utility. That contract was never fully transparent, but it was tolerable, because the data being exchanged was relatively limited, and the power being granted to corporations was relatively constrained. What is happening now is a qualitative shift, not just a quantitative one. AI changes the nature of the exchange. It is no longer simply about what data you provide. It is about what can be inferred, predicted, and acted upon from that data at a scale and speed and depth that no previous technology could achieve. There's no easy way to understand the matrix of privacy policies and opt-ins and opt-outs across all these helpful AI tools. And user inertia means most people will give all this little thought. That sentence, written by a Forbes cybersecurity analyst tracking the situation, is one of the most honest assessments of where we currently stand. Most people will not change their settings. Most people will not read the terms of service updates. Most people will not file lawsuits or contact their legislators or migrate to privacy. Focused email alternatives. Most people will continue using Gmail exactly as they always have, trusting that the system is designed in their interest, not in the interest of the entity that built and operates it. And that inertia, that rational but consequential passivity, is precisely what every tech corporation with an AI agenda is counting on. This automatic opt-in model is common in the US, where most companies, including Google, enable opting in of data collection of cookies, targeted marketing, data sharing, or AI features by default. The Gmail situation is not an anomaly. It is a template. The question being answered right now in real time, through millions of unchallenged default settings, is whether the population of internet users will accept AI integration into their private communications as a condition of accessing the tools they need. And based on the numbers, based on how few people have actually changed their Gmail settings, the answer so far appears to be yes. Not because people agree, but because most people do not know to disagree. Sentiment on platforms like X reveals a mix of outrage and resignation. Recent posts from 2026 highlight users sharing experiences of discovering these settings, with some reporting unexpected data usage alerts after audits. This grassroots awareness campaign has pressured Google to consider simplifying its privacy controls, though no immediate changes have been announced. No immediate changes. That is the phrase worth sitting with. The company has faced a class action lawsuit, a viral social media firestorm seen by millions, coverage in major publications across the world, regulatory scrutiny, and significant reputational damage. And still, no immediate changes to the default settings that caused all of it. That is either extraordinary corporate confidence or extraordinary corporate arrogance, possibly both. What comes next is the question that nobody can fully answer, and that uncertainty is itself significant. The amended complaint in Thel vs. Google is coming. The court will eventually rule on whether AI-processed private communications constitute a cognizable legal injury. That ruling will either set a precedent that constrains AI companies across the industry or create a legal green light that accelerates exactly the kind of silent, default-enabled data access that started this controversy. Either outcome reshapes the landscape, and the users who are caught in the middle, all 1.8 billion of them, are not really participants in that decision. They are the subject matter. Meanwhile, Google's 2026 roadmap points toward deeper Gemini integration, not less. The AI is not going away. It is going deeper into more products, more services, more moments of your digital life. And the decision you face right now, today, is not whether you trust AI in the abstract. It is whether you trust this specific company with this specific history of privacy controversies to manage the most intimate record of your life, your private correspondence, with the discretion and restraint that record deserves. Go change your settings. Both of them. Right now, before you close this tab, before the next notification pulls your attention somewhere else, before the friction of the process makes you tell yourself you will do it later. Because later, statistically speaking, does not come. And the machine running inside your inbox does not wait for later. It is already running. It has been running since October 10th, 2025. And the only person who can stop it inside your specific account for your specific emails is you. But even after you do, even after you navigate both menus and toggle both switches and save both settings, ask yourself the question that no corporate statement, no legal filing, and no privacy guide has fully answered. What has already been processed? What has already been learned? What inferences have already been drawn from years of private correspondence that passed through an inbox you thought was yours alone? The switch you can turn off today does not erase what happened before you knew to look for it. And in a world where AI systems have near-perfect memory, where data can be stored indefinitely and analyzed retroactively as models become more capable, the past is not necessarily past, it is a data set. And the question of who controls that data set, what they can do with it, and what they will do with it next, that question remains entirely, disturbingly open.